Hello and welcome to another session of Other Two Cents. In this episode, we're discussing business ventures in the African community. And my guests today to discuss the topic are Ebenezer Smith, Nana Kwame Asumenin, and George Nati. Ebenezer, Nana Kwame, George, how are you doing?
Very well, thank you. Very well. How are you?
I'm very well, thank you, Ebenezer.
I'm good, and trust you are well too in the UK.
Yeah, all good here. Thanks for asking. And George?
Yeah, I'm fine. Thanks for having me here.
If you like what we're doing on this channel, please like our video, leave a comment, and if you haven't already, please consider subscribing. Since COVID, life has changed for everybody. So what I'd like to start with is to just get your views on how COVID has affected, I guess, your individual lives and your careers. I'll start with you, Nana Kwame.
COVID has affected my life in so many ways. I used to be on the go all the time, in meetings, we come home, we attend to house chores and then off to the next meeting. And now I find myself like grounded at home. Since March, in South Africa, we've been on lockdown. It's been eased some way, from March to now, but technically we're on lockdown and I've been working from home. And life has never been the same of, running around, traveling, going to sites and all that. So COVID has changed my life in a drastic way. But the positive side is I've never had this awesome time to spend with my family. And it's been amazing. So I believe that in every crisis, there lies great opportunities. And I've taken advantage of this situation to bond more with my family and to think of new business ideas and how to be agile and productive in the season.
I'll come straight to you, Ebenezer. How has COVID changed your life and your career in South Africa?
Yeah, thanks for that, Gary. So on the personal level, it's been interesting. Same as Kwame, getting to spend a lot of time at home with the kids and my wife. It's changed our lives in the sense that, so I have a pregnant wife currently, and the difficulty there is they don't have a lot of data on the effects of COVID on unborn children. So we've had to be extra cautious. We've had to pull the kids out of school for the remainder of the year, etc. So there's been that little disruption, but again, every cloud has a silver lining. On the business side of things, contrary to what most people are experiencing, COVID has been our best time. So, I almost feel a little guilty saying that, but it's been very good for us. We've done better in this COVID time than any other time, really. And I think it's the industry that we're in, and the need for everybody to sort of try their level best to have the same level of productivity remotely. So I think as we dive in, I'll probably touch a bit more on what we do and we'll understand why it's been a good time for us business-wise.
But it sounds like things are really good from what you say. So good for you. Coming to you, George. COVID, it's affected everybody. How has it affected you?
Yeah, COVID hasn't been so kind to us. Like Nana Kwame and Ebenezer said, it hasn't been so kind to us. Basically, I attempted to start some business on my own. For the second time in my life, I started some business on my own. But that kind of business involved a lot of contact with people. So once COVID set in, there was no way I could proceed with that. Personally, I've been really affected because whatever kind of money that is needed, be it small or big, has to go into feeding and housekeeping and other things without any other kind of money coming in.
So switching gears slightly, clearly COVID has affected the whole world. Globalization has slowed a little bit. Logistics has been hugely impacted, not least with China being the manufacturing powerhouse of pretty much the whole world. Now, my question is, in terms of the impact COVID has had, particularly on logistics and globalization and the flow of goods and services, is it now time for every country to be self-sufficient and have a balanced economy? I'll start with you, Ebenezer.
Oh, absolutely, absolutely. So I'm Man, I could go on for days on this one. I'm a Pan-Africanist at heart, and I've always been an advocate of a united Africa, with our wealth in mineral resources, mineral deposits, reserves, etc., oil, and every possible mineral the world consumes. We're the richest continent. So I think it's really at the time where one apart from individual countries, speaking from an African perspective, it might be a bit of a far reach, but I guess it needs to happen at a somewhat micro level in terms of countries before we expand it to a micro African level. But yeah, absolutely, people need to the production line or the value chain needs to be insourced and not outsourced to China. So you'll find that many countries that can easily produce many of their commodities are still importing some things, basic things from China. So it's about time people need to break loose and realize they need to learn to be self-sufficient. But better yet, African countries need to learn to rely on each other and to be able to produce the goods that we need as a continent. So, yeah.
Right. Thanks for that. I'll switch straight to you, George.
We must try as much as possible to depend or buy our own goods. It's scary sometimes, people produce a lot of shoes in Ghana, but people don't really want to patronize it. So I believe that this is really taught us a lesson. Countries like Australia were dependent on China and other countries for their medications. If you look at most of the countries, I believe, yes. Nigeria, yes, they were dependent on foreign imports. But now that we have COVID, we have learned our lessons. We need to set up and have policies put in place so that we can be self-sufficient in a way to help our development.
On the fishing front, you'll be interested to know that the Chinese fish off our own coast, put them in containers and send it straight to the port. It doesn't come all the way from China. Which is crazy. Nana Kwame, coming to you on the same question. Is it about time that African countries are self-sufficient and each have a balanced economy? Because if you look around Europe, you look around the rest of the world, it's not necessarily a given that, let's say, a continent, right, could even rely on the different regions of that continent. Take America for one. The COVID situation is not balanced across states within the United States. It's perfectly possible that we could have, a similar pandemic like Ebola or something else, which is disproportionately affecting different parts of the country. So we can't even necessarily rely on logistics from other African countries. What are your views on the subject?
I think absolutely it's high time African countries become self-sufficient. It's way overdue. I mean, I remember Dr. Kwame Nkrumah was proposing this idea in 1963 when the African Union was formed. And to just give a simple answer, it's time for us to stop talking and acting, because it was quite strange in March when all countries were closing their borders. Like it's never happened before. And I was thinking of landlocked countries where, like Zimbabwe or Malawi, where you now need to rely on your neighboring country, like Mozambique or South Africa, to still import things into your country. So generally, if you're self-sufficient, you've got more control over your affairs. So I think it's more than high time that Africa becomes self-reliant. We need to get our act together, and we need to start acting and stop talking.
Different industries have come to rely very heavily on technology. Even the the parts of industry that are for example, mining, processing, manufacturing, everything is heavily dependent on technology. What aspects of technology do you feel that African countries need to focus on? And I'll start with you, Ebenezer, on that.
So I think the cloud computing is the bottom line, right? But to take a step back from that, it's really your internet infrastructure, right? that has to be the primary enabling factor for wonderful things to grow. It's a conversation we often have here in this country where there are many parts of the country where you have really poor internet. So countries need to really decide, to exist in this era. You need to understand that everything is on the cloud. So countries need to start with investing heavily in the internet infrastructure, where you should be able to have really high bandwidth internet at all times. And when you have that, really enables guys like us, companies like ours, to be able to then produce and publish solutions that boost economic growth. So cloud computing is the biggest thing. Everything you do really, today, if you're a business, you have to have some sort of cloud presence, whether that's where you store your data or that's where you actually compute. You have to be in the cloud. And I think the COVID scenario has really solved that. So on our part, it was always, and that's the other thing too. Oftentimes you'll find a lot of clients, public sector and private, don't necessarily understand why they need to go that route. So the reason I said why COVID has been really good for us is, we would initially or previously spend half of our time trying to convince a client why they have to go cloud. Now you don't have to convince them. They are feeling the pinch. They know it. The story is is sold. You just basically have to present what it is that you're offering, and clients are biting. So cloud computing.
So coming to you, Nana Kwame, Ebenezer suggesting internet access and cloud computing is the way forward. What are your thoughts in terms of what technologies African countries need to focus on?
I completely agree with Ebenezer. Now everyone is working remotely, and the internet infrastructure is basically the conduit, the platform that you're able to reach people, even your next door neighbor, because you're not allowed to go see your next door neighbor and overseas. And I've been able to work all these 5 months or so effectively using different platforms, Teams, Zoom, and many others. And this whole rationale of you need to be in a space to be effective at your work has been completely dismantled with this season which we're in, the COVID season, and is giving a very strong case for remote working or working remotely. And I couldn't have agreed with even more on the internet infrastructure and cloud computing. I 100% agree with this notion.
The internet alone and cloud computing doesn't make for a balanced economy, right? There's a service sector. No doubt they all sort of empowered and they all need comms networks and cloud computing to function. But in terms of research and development, in terms of engineering, in terms of just science, right? In terms of, everything from medicine to raw materials and discoveries and things like that. It will be interesting, and I think it'll be really useful if, the way China has gone from almost nothing in the 1950s to where it is now, if African countries could at least learn from that, if nothing else, and I guess invest a lot more into, the heady subjects that we seem to just abandon after university in the sub-Saharan African countries. Now, bringing this to a more personal level, what sorts of businesses and ideas and ventures would you suggest people go into in these COVID times? Now, I ask this because resources are limited. This is not on the basis of national infrastructure, like laying fiber up and down the country. This is about using limited resources that we individually have to diversify our careers, to try something new, to generate second and third income streams. So I'll start with you, Ebenezer. What are your suggestions as to what people need to do to start new enterprises on a personal level, by the way?
Yeah, thanks. So I'm not personally a big advocate on people necessarily starting sort of completely new businesses in this COVID time. I think it'll be somewhat unrealistic to expect everybody to be an entrepreneur all of a sudden and find some sort of new idea quickly and implement it. I think people really rather need to understand how their businesses should be more agile, or how their business should be able to foresee these sort of challenges and be prepared to survive in those sort of times. And I think, as was mentioned, the primary thing is being remote, being on the cloud. Right? That's the primary thing, because you're still able to engage clients, etc. So. But for those who do want to sort of see, I think mind mapping is really the easiest thing, right? It's not a COVID time. COVID is just a set of conditions that you need to respond to in an entrepreneurial way. Conditions exist all the time. Wherever it is, whether it's COVID or pre-COVID or post-COVID, there will always be a set of challenges that you need to certainly navigate and find opportunities, right? So I think it could be anything. You really just need to look at the industries that are booming. So pharmaceutical is booming right now. Logistics is booming. I'm talking about domestic logistics. People now don't want to go to the stores to buy their food. They want to go online, place their order, and have somebody deliver it to them. So delivery services, that is absolutely booming. So there's certain areas that you just really need to look at and understand what are the processes that a particular area has, and how do you simplify that. And that is really the key to any successful business in this era, in this technology era, where if you look at a company like Uber, a simple thing, we used to have to go through a certain number of steps to be able to get a taxi to come pick you up. All they simply did is they simplified it. That is it. If you just make people's lives simpler and what they already have to do, they'll give you their money to do that.
It's interesting. Ebenezer has kept to his effectively internet and cloud computing stuff. George has just built a little bit further on that to I guess highlight the marketing and the sales aspect of when you've already established the business. I'll come to you, Nana Kwame, to redeem this. What businesses and ventures can people get into in these COVID times?
Change is the only constant in life. And change is an amazing thing for any entrepreneur. It depends on your skills. Everyone is gifted one way or the other. So talking about whatever business ventures or opportunities you might enter will depend on your core giftings and your core skills. But also, you need to apply what I call instincts, your inborn drive, understanding the power of the moment to be able to act quickly. So, for example, you're gifted in an area where you need to be in contact with people, but the change that has happened due to the COVID doesn't allow you to be able to carry out your natural gifting. So you need to be quick and agile to say that, okay, look, what are the opportunities in the marketplace? So let's take, for example, you've got everyone in homes. You've got kids not going to school. You've got parents at home. Parents need to work, and kids are just running all over the show. So there you find an opportunity and say, okay, cool. How can I reach people in their homes, engage their children whilst their parents are working? And we've got this Zoom platform where you can say, okay, you know what, I'm prepared to give some lessons online where you can give some tutorials, which myself I do, and also, sometimes if you've got some dreams and hopes of maybe writing a book, this is the perfect time. And I will end up by saying that isolation is not necessarily a bad thing. Actually, gifted people work their magic in isolation. And I think this is a perfect time to be able to look inward and say, look, what is it that I've been wanting to do? And because of this 9-to-5 job, I haven't been able to do, then hit it. So by the time the COVID is over, you've got all your ducks in the row ready to, be on top. And I believe that those who take advantage of the season will come on top come end of the year when the COVID peak is over.
Right. Thanks for that, Nana Kwame. So look, this is interesting. Sure. Go ahead, Ebenezer, before I read in.
All right. So So as I was saying, and I think my two brothers also touched on the same, is for me, COVID again presents a set of challenges that you have to navigate. And there's always challenges. So being an entrepreneur or going into businesses, and nothing's changed. There's nothing really special per se. As Kwame said, you just have to be able to see the opportunities. So take example like what you were saying. People are in isolation. Some people have to go back to work. Companies are slowly beginning to open. So here's an idea, for instance. Most parents don't want their children to necessarily go to school and mingle with 100 other children and maybe bring something back home. So people might be prepared to pay a premium, for instance, where you could say, okay, I'm going to have a group of 5 students in my house or 5 children in my house that daycare and teach them some sort of, whatever the case may be. And parents might be even prepared to pay 2 or 3 times what they ordinarily would have paid for that child to go to school. But you're answering an issue where they want their children to have as little contact as possible, But I think if I may just close on this on my part, on this topic, I think the again from a tech perspective, oftentimes people think it should be tech people that have or bring tech ideas, and that's not the case. You don't have to be a developer or have a software company to be able to find a really great tech idea that solves a modern day problem. I think anybody really who sees the opportunities and sees the challenges and the problems that people have, you can come up with your own solutions, and it doesn't have to be necessarily even within your skill set to say, that you have to be a developer to be able to develop an app. You just have to think of a really great idea that really answers truthfully a situation, a problem that people have, and you can have somebody build that for you and take that to market if. So I think people just need to be aware and look for opportunities. There are countless opportunities in every sector and every area. Thanks.
You know what's interesting? Just listening to what everybody said. We've touched on pretty much everything based on IT and more or less office-based work. The trades, plumbing, electrician, carpentry, metalwork. You can pull IT skills into this set of trades as well. And I say this because if you take professions like being a lawyer, a doctor, an accountant, those professions are regulated. You need structures and frameworks to be able to operate in those professions. Anything else that falls outside of regulation, I consider as a trade, right? But it's interesting how nobody ever talks about that. And in African circles, we tend to look down on the trades. But when you go to places like Germany, the trades are everything. Engineers, the ability to make stuff, whether it's wood, metal, after all, cars are made from metal and exotic materials. It's not that far off from making, let's say, exotic furniture with wood and interesting materials like fabrics and leather and so forth. It's actually not that far off. But in Africa, nobody even considers it, which is why we import virtually everything. So all the things everybody's talked about, who's making your clothes? Who's making the next car you go and purchase? Who's making or mining the minerals that you'll be using to hopefully make the microchips that will power the next set of supercomputers that will power AI? Who's doing all of that? Nobody. And for me, I'm looking to the day when Africans will get up and say, you know what? Yeah, I've trained in the office-based professions, but I'm also going to double up, especially in these COVID times, and pick up another skill and a completely different skill, hopefully one in the trades. And I feel like unless Africans up and down the demographic start looking at those sorts of things, we're not going to get out of anything that will make us resilient for the future. Those are my views on that. I'm happy for anybody to come back on what they said.